Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We like to get our hands dirty with the nitty-gritty details of, well, basically anything cybersecurity related. And today is no different. We're going deep on CMMC compliance,
Ah,
which we know is probably something you've already heard a lot about. But we're here to, try to really give you the info you need, cut through the noise, and figure out what really matters,
Yeah.
especially for businesses like yours. So to help us do that, we have
Yep.
an expert here with us today.
you got it. CMMC, or Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, if you want the full name,
Yeah.
is basically the new standard for cybersecurity in the defense industrial base. DIB, so if your business is,
Yeah.
working with the DoD, handling any kind of sensitive government data, CMMC is going to be a big deal for you.
Okay, so I think it'd be helpful maybe just to step back for a second. What exactly is CMMC trying to protect? When we say data, what kind of data are we talking about?
Yeah, so there's two main types: federal contract information, FCI, and then controlled unclassified information, CUI. So FCI, that's pretty broad. It's basically any information that the government provides to you or that you generate for them as part of
Yeah.
a contract. So think contract numbers, payment details, meeting minutes, that kind of stuff.
So not, top secret intel,
Yeah.
but not something you'd want just anyone to have access to either.
Exactly. Now, CUI, that's a step up in terms of sensitivity. This is information that the government has specifically marked as needing, safeguards.
Yeah.
Dissemination controls. So think technical drawings for weapon systems,
Yeah.
locations of critical infrastructure, healthcare records of military personnel.
Okay, so yeah, definitely. Higher stakes with CUI. But why the sudden push for CMMC? I mean, didn't the DoD have security standards in place before this?
Yeah, they did. But the old system was based on self-attestation, NIST SP 800-171. And that just wasn't really cutting it. You had companies claiming to be compliant without actually having the right security controls in place.
So checking the box, but not,
Basically.
actually following through.
So CMMC brings in these mandatory third-party audits
Mm-hmm.
done by C3PAOs to really verify that you're actually implementing those security controls.
Okay, so this is where we see the real impact for businesses, right? No more just saying, yep, we're compliant, now you have to prove it.
Absolutely. The game has changed. If you want those DoD contracts, you need to be CMMC certified.
Right.
At the level that's specified in the contract. No two ways about it.
And this brings us to CMMC 2.0. I know there was an update that kind of simplified things, right?
Yeah, they streamlined it a bit. So now there are 3 levels of certification: foundational, advanced, and expert. Kind of a tiered system. That aligns pretty closely with, NIST SP 800-171 and 800-172.
Okay, so level 1, foundational. That's like the entry point. What kind of businesses are we talking about at that level?
Level 1 is all about basic cyber hygiene. The fundamentals. It covers 17 security controls, and it's really focused on companies that are only handling FCI. So think, a small business providing office supplies to a military base.
Okay, so level 1 is about establishing those foundational practices. What about level 2?
Level 2, advanced. That's where things get a little more serious. It covers 110 security controls pulled straight from NIST SP 800-171. And this is for companies handling CUI. So think like a manufacturer. Building components for a fighter jet. They're dealing with CUI, so level 2 would be their target.
Makes sense. And level 3,
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah.
That's the big leagues, right? For companies handling the most sensitive information.
Exactly. Level 3, it goes up to over 130 security controls, draws from NIST SP 800-172, and it also adds in requirements to protect against advanced persistent threats. APTs, we're talking nation-state level actors here, so the controls are much more robust, require a higher level of expertise.
Okay, so we have our levels.
Mm-hmm.
But how does the business actually demonstrate compliance? What does that process look like?
It all starts with the System Security Plan, SSP. Think of this as the blueprint for your entire cybersecurity program. The SSP outlines your security controls, how you're implementing them, any gaps you've identified, and your plan for remediation, what we call POA&Ms, plans of action and milestones.
So the SSP is like a living document that
Yeah.
you're constantly updating and refining.
Exactly. You can't just create it, stick it in a drawer, and forget about it. It needs to reflect your current security posture and show that you're actively managing and improving your cyber defenses.
Then comes the audit, right? That's the moment of truth with the C3PAO.
Right. The C3PAO comes in, assesses your implemented security controls, reviews your SSP, conducts interviews, and ultimately determines whether you meet the requirements for your desired CMMC level.
So let's say you go through the audit, knock on wood,
Oh.
and you pass. What happens then?
Well, first of all, congratulations. You get your CMMC certificate, which is valid for 3 years. But it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Cybersecurity is a continuous process. It's not a destination.
So you can't just relax and assume you're good for the next 3 years.
Exactly. Threats are constantly evolving. New vulnerabilities pop up all the time, and your business processes might change. You need to maintain continuous monitoring, conduct regular reviews, and update your SSP to reflect those changes.
So CMMC compliance becomes part of your company's DNA.
That's the idea. It shouldn't be seen as a burden, but rather as an integral part of your overall business strategy, something that contributes to your long-term success and resilience in the DIB.
Okay, so we've laid out some of the basics here, but let's get real for a minute. What are the stakes if a business doesn't meet those CMMC requirements? What are the consequences?
Consequences can be pretty significant, first and foremost. You could be disqualified from bidding on or winning DoD contracts that require CMMC certification. And for a lot of businesses that rely on those contracts, that could be a huge blow.
Yeah, and it's not just about losing out on future contracts. Existing contracts could be at risk as well, right?
Absolutely. If you're not CMMC compliant at the level specified in your current contract, you could be in breach of contract, which could lead to its termination. And it's not just about contracts. There's also the potential for legal and financial repercussions.
Okay, can you give us an example of what that might look like in the real world?
Sure. Imagine a company handling sensitive information, and they suffer a data breach because their security controls weren't adequate. They could face lawsuits from the people who were affected by that breach,
Right.
regulatory fines, and even reputational damage. That could take years to recover from.
So the costs of noncompliance
Yeah.
go way beyond just missing out on a few contracts. They can have ripple effects across the entire business.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the False Claims Act. If you're
Yeah.
claiming to be CMMC compliant when you're not, you could be in some serious legal hot water. The Department of Justice has been cracking down on those types of violations, so it's not something to take lightly.
So the message is clear. CMMC compliance is not optional. It's essential for any business that wants to work with the DoD and protect its future. But I know what a lot of businesses are thinking. This all sounds incredibly complex and expensive.
It can be, especially for businesses that don't have dedicated cybersecurity expertise. That's where managed security service providers, or MSSPs, can really come in and help.
Okay, so let's dive into that a bit deeper.
Yeah.
How can an MSSP help a business navigate this CMMC landscape?
Well, it starts with a comprehensive gap analysis. A good MSSP will really dive deep into your current security posture. Compare it to the specific CMMC requirements for the maturity level you're aiming for.
So they're essentially creating a roadmap, highlighting the areas you need to focus on
Yeah.
before that formal C3PO audit.
Precisely. And this is incredibly valuable for businesses. The MSSP can pinpoint weaknesses in your security controls, help you develop a robust system security plan, that SSP we talked about, and guide you through the implementation of those all-important NIST SP 871 controls.
Okay, so gap analysis, SSP development.check. But CMMC is about more than just documentation, right? What about the actual technical implementation of those security controls?
Right, and that's where an MSSP's expertise really shines. They can implement a whole range of security solutions, from multi-factor authentication, MFA, and next-gen firewalls, to intrusion detection systems, IDS, and security information and event management platforms, SIEM platforms.
I'm guessing most businesses, certainly smaller ones, don't have that kind of capability in-house.
Right. And even for those that do,
Yeah.
managing all those systems, making sure they're configured correctly, and working 24/7, that's a full-time job.
So it's not just about buying the tech, it's about having the people and expertise to manage it properly.
Exactly. And that's where the ongoing support of an MSSP becomes so crucial. They can handle things like vulnerability scanning, patch management, security awareness training for your employees, all those things that are essential for a strong security posture.
And all of that feeds into the POA&Ms,
Yeah.
those plans of actions and milestones we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The MSSP will help you develop a realistic plan to address any gaps that were identified, prioritize your remediation efforts, and make sure those POA&Ms are closed within that critical 180-day window.
So it's about being proactive.
Yeah.
Not just reacting to problems after they happen.
Right. It's about building a culture of cybersecurity within your organization. And MSSP can help you shift from a reactive check-the-box mentality to a proactive security-first approach.
Okay, so you've partnered with an MSSP.
Yeah.
You've addressed those gaps. Your SSP is in great shape,
Yeah.
feeling good. But then comes the audit. And even with all that preparation, it can still be pretty nerve-wracking.
Absolutely. But this is another area where an MSSP can really be your partner. They can conduct mock assessments to simulate the actual C3PAO audit, help you identify any remaining weaknesses, and ensure that you're truly ready for the real thing.
So it's like a dress rehearsal before opening night.
Exactly. And the MSSP will be there to support you during the actual audit itself,
Yeah.
providing documentation, answering questions, making sure the process runs smoothly.
That peace of mind must be invaluable for businesses, knowing that they have that expert guidance to fall back on.
It really is. And even after the audit, the MSSP's role doesn't end. They'll help you address any findings or recommendations from the C3PAO and support you with the ongoing monitoring and management that's needed to maintain compliance over the long term.
Because, as we said, CMMC is not a one-time project. It's an ongoing journey.
Exactly. And the threat landscape is constantly changing, so you need a partner who can help you stay ahead of the curve and adapt to new challenges as they come up.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the cost of CMMC compliance. I know this is a big concern for a lot of businesses. Can you give us a realistic idea of what we're talking about here?
Sure, it really depends on the size of the business, the complexity of their IT environment, and the CMMC maturity level they're going for. But let's take a mid-sized manufacturer pursuing level 2 certification as an example.
I think that's probably a pretty typical scenario for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, probably. They could be looking at initial cost anywhere from $50,000 to well over $100,000.
Okay, so that's a significant investment. Can you break down where those costs are going?
Yeah, so a big chunk of that goes towards those initial assessment and remediation efforts.
Yes.
You've got the cost of the MSSP's services,
Yes.
software licenses, maybe some hardware upgrades, and of course the C3PAO audit fees.
So it's a multifaceted investment. It's not just about paying for the audit itself.
Right. And then there are the ongoing costs associated with maintaining compliance, things like ongoing monitoring, vulnerability management, incident response, and regular reviews and updates to your SSP. Those costs can range anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 per year, again, depending on the scope of your operations.
So it's not a small expense. But I think it's important to frame this in the context of what's at stake. The cost of noncompliance, as we discussed earlier, can be far greater.
Absolutely. That's the key takeaway. CMMC compliance is an investment in your business's future. It's about protecting your sensitive data, maintaining the trust of your government customers, and securing your long-term viability in the DIB.
It's about turning what could be a hurdle into a competitive advantage.
Precisely. And by looking at CMMC compliance as a strategic initiative, rather than just a compliance checkbox, businesses can actually reap significant benefits.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the what, the why, the how, and even the how much of CMMC compliance. But as we start to wrap up this deep dive, I want to focus on the so what. What's the key message for our listeners as they embark on their own CMMC journey?
The key message is this. Start now. Don't wait until the last minute to try and scramble for compliance. The sooner you start the process, the better prepared you'll be, and the smoother your journey will be.
Great advice. Great advice. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
CMMC compliance. It's not just a burden. It's a strategic investment. By embracing cybersecurity, working with the right partners, and taking a proactive approach, you can turn CMMC compliance into a competitive advantage. They can help you strengthen your position in the DIB and set yourself up for success.
Great insights. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into CMMC compliance. We hope you found it helpful as you navigate your own CMMC journey.